Welcome, fight fans, to an exclusive breakdown of a developing situation that has completely upended the lightweight landscape and triggered a massive wave of controversy across the entire mixed martial arts community. A storm is currently brewing at the absolute pinnacle of the UFC lightweight division. Rumors and speculative reports have been circulating rapidly across social media and various MMA media outlets, with some wild claims suggesting that UFC CEO Dana White has outright terminated the contract of the division's top-ranked contender, Arman Tsarukyan. While the reality of the situation is far more nuanced than a standard firing, the actual chain of events highlights a severe and deepening rift between the promotion's executive brass and one of the most talented 155-pound fighters on the planet. The epicenter of this explosive standoff centers around an unprecedented, highly ambitious event, UFC Freedom 250, also widely known as the UFC White House card. Scheduled to take place on June 14th, this event is being heavily promoted as arguably the most historic and visually unique spectacle the organization has ever compiled. Rumors within the industry suggest that the promotion has invested an astronomical $60 million to bring this specific vision to life. The stakes for the evening could not be any higher. The marquee attraction features a massive lightweight championship unification bout. Ilia Topuria, the reigning undisputed lightweight champion, Justin Gaethje, the interim lightweight champion. The grand nature of the event was put on full display during a promotional launch at the Oval Office, where the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was in attendance alongside the headlining fighters. During this high-profile meeting, a customized American-inspired UFC Freedom Belt was officially unveiled. While the strap retains the classic aesthetic of a traditional UFC championship title, it incorporates distinct patriotic elements, featuring silver UFC lettering adorned with stars reminiscent of the American flag, alongside a prominent golden 250 emblem commemorating 250 years of American independence. Given the massive financial and political capital invested into June 14th, the UFC executive team sought an ironclad insurance policy. Dana White publicly announced on influencer Nina Drama's Kick livestream that Arman Tsarukyan, the Gemma, two-ranked lightweight Lieutenant in the world, had been officially designated as the official backup fighter for the main event. Should either Topuria or Gaethje suffer a last-minute medical issue, injury, or fail to make the required weight limit, Tsarukyan was expected to step directly into the spotlight to save the historic headliner. Also in the defiance and the clash of schedules. Despite the public declaration from the UFC hierarchy, Tsarukyan chose to draw a firm line in the sand, establishing his own explicit terms and creating a logistical nightmare for the promotion. During a high-profile interview on the Ariel Helwani show, the 29-year-old contender explicitly stated that he has no intention of traveling to Washington, D.C. to step onto the official UFC scales on weigh-in day. Tsarukyan elaborated on his perspective during a subsequent appearance on the Jackson Podcast YouTube channel. "It's confirmed, but I haven't signed a contract yet. I'm excited that if something happens, they'll call me. I'm the first guy who is going to jump in, and I'm getting ready for that. I'm already on my diet, but it always sucks to be back up, but now I have to do it." The core issue preventing Tsarukyan from fulfilling the traditional, strict obligations of a backup fighter is an overlapping promotional commitment outside of the UFC octagon. Tsarukyan is currently booked to compete in a wrestling match against former interim UFC champion Tony Ferguson at an event titled Brawn F10, Real American Freestyle. This grappling showcase is scheduled for June 13th, exactly one day prior to the White House card, and is set to take place in St. Louis, Missouri, Braunville. Logistically, the two obligations are functionally incompatible. To serve as an official UFC backup, Tsarukyan would need to be physically present in Washington, D.C. on the morning of June 13th to hit the official 155-pound championship limit on the scales. Managing this would require him to weigh in for the UFC and then immediately board a flight to Missouri, an average prognoth 2.5-hour flight time to compete in his wrestling match later that same day. Addressing the media at a press conference ahead of Prognoth Brof 09, Tsarukyan made his final stance abundantly clear. "It's 2 weeks left. I think they're going to fight, so I'm going to wait for my chance. I'm going to do Rof F." Furthermore, Tsarukyan openly stated in a separate interview that he refused to put his body through a grueling weight cut strictly for financial compensation without a guaranteed fight. No, I did not talk to them, and I would not cut my weight just for money because it's hard. While freestyle wrestling utilizes same-day weigh-ins, meaning Tsarukyan will technically be making weight in Missouri on the morning of the UFC event, his physical absence from Washington, D.C. renders his backup status practically useless on weigh-in day. If either Topuria or Gaethje were to pull out at the 11th hour or miss weight during the official morning window, Tsarukyan would be over 800 miles away, unable to step onto the scales or fill the vacancy. Reacting to the logistical chaos, the undisputed champion Ilia Topuria completely dismissed Tsarukyan's backup status when speaking to Shaquille Maharjan of CBS Sports. Topuria, who has been embroiled in a bitter social media war with Tsarukyan, which included Tsarukyan accusing the champion of purchasing fake Instagram followers and Topuria trolling him in return on Ariel Helwani's show, remained completely unbothered. I absolutely don't care about it. I'm going to be in that octagon no matter what happens. The result is the same with everyone. In addition, a history of friction with UFC brass. To fully understand why Tsarukyan's refusal to comply with the standard backup protocol has provoked such a harsh reaction from Dana White, one must look at the turbulent history between the fighter and the promotion. This is far from the first time Tsarukyan has found himself in the promotional doghouse. The roots of the current animosity trace back to Braun's April 2024 at UFC 300, where Tsarukyan secured the most significant victory of his career by defeating former lightweight champion and promotional legend Charles Oliveira. That spectacular performance earned him a guaranteed undisputed title shot against then-champion Islam Makhachev, which was formally scheduled to headline UFC 311 in January 2025. However, the highly anticipated title fight fell apart in disastrous fashion. Just one day before the event, Tsarukyan was forced to withdraw from the championship bout after suffering a severe back injury during the final stages of his weight cut. The last-minute cancellation left the UFC scrambling to salvage the pay-per-view main event. Brazil's Renato Moicano stepped up on a mere 24 hours notice, only to be quickly defeated by Makhachev. Also in the fallout from UFC 311 was instantaneous. Dana White, who deeply values dependability and fighters who show up under the brightest lights, was thoroughly incensed by the last-minute disruption. Speaking to MMA Junkie and other reporters in the aftermath of Wamameshabruf 100 getting Trembly Ovdov, I wouldn't say that he's the odd man out. He had an opportunity, and you guys know how that played out. He's going to have to work his way back. I don't give a what the number says. He's going to have to work his way back. It's just too much goes into this for those type of things to happen. Tsarukyan's path back to promotional grace was further complicated by a series of outside-the-cage disciplinary infractions and controversial outbursts. UFC 300 altercation. Prior to his walkout against Oliveira, Tsarukyan engaged in a physical altercation with a fan who had gestured obscenely at him, resulting in a formal fine and suspension from the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Ray F6 post-match brawl. Following a victory over Georgios Poulos in a grappling match, a heated post-fight confrontation escalated into a widespread team-on-team brawl, with video footage capturing Tsarukyan striking Poulos after the whistle. UFC Qatar headbutt. Miapin Sahan, in an attempt to rebuild favor, Tsarukyan successfully weighed in as a backup fighter for bronze UFC 317. However, he quickly erased that goodwill during the ceremonial weigh-ins on November 21, 2025 for UFC Fight Night, Tsarukyan vs. Hooker in Doha, Qatar. During their formal face-off, Tsarukyan suddenly headbutted Dan Hooker, while UFC matchmaker Mick Maynard and security immediately intervened, and ESPN initially reported no injuries. Hooker later revealed that the strike had broken his nose. By January 2026, Dana White publicly confirmed that the chaotic headbutt incident in Qatar directly influenced the promotion's decision to bypass Tsarukyan for an interim title opportunity. Instead, with undisputed champion Ilia Topuria taking a brief hiatus for personal reasons, the UFC booked an interim lightweight title fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett for UFC 324. The matchmaking decision sparked intense backlash from the MMA community. Former champion Islam Makhachev publicly questioned the promotion's logic. UFC Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier insisted that Topuria vs. Tsarukyan was the only fight that made sense for the division, and Ariel Helwani heavily criticized the booking. Despite the near-unanimous media consensus that Tsarukyan was being unfairly passed over, White stood firm, reiterating that the #2 contender had to earn his position through compliance and reliability rather than sheer rank. Also, the blueprint for a counter comeback. Faced with a career-threatening stagnation in the UFC, Tsarukyan launched an incredibly aggressive, highly unconventional strategy over the subsequent 6 months to reshape his public image and stay sharp. He pivoted heavily into external athletic competitions and digital media, transforming himself into an incredibly active and viral martial artist outside the confines of the UFC octagon. Despite not competing under the UFC banner since November 2025, Tsarukyan has maintained a staggering competitive frequency, participating in 7 total events over the past year, with 2 additional matchups currently booked over the next 2 months. Also, an upcoming wrestling match and beyond the wrestling mats, Tsarukyan completely overhauled his public persona by leaning into lifestyle content and influencer collaborations. He amassed a massive new wave of social media popularity through viral, lighthearted food challenge videos, where he consumed large quantities of food. This digital blueprint successfully transformed him from a perceived liability into a fan favorite whom audiences actively wanted to watch. The full-court public relations press eventually forced Dana White to publicly acknowledge and praise the turnaround, holding up Tsarukyan as a prime example of how an athlete should rebuild their brand after falling out of favor. Listen, the run that he's been on after is impressive. That's what you should do. Listen, when you end up sideways and you do some dumb get out there and make people want to see you, and he has definitely done that. That's a fact. In addition, this impressive career rehabilitation is precisely what makes his current refusal to attend the UFC White House weigh-ins so incredibly volatile. Tsarukyan had successfully clawed his way back to the doorstep of a world title, only to completely disrupt the arrangement at the final hour. His manager, Daniel Rubenstein, had previously calculated the backup position as a guaranteed golden ticket to a title shot, telling Heavy.com, Arman being the backup for the UFC Lightweight Championship again solidifies him as the #1 contender. He will be the next challenger regardless of what happens in the main event at UFC Freedom 250. If Arman isn't asked to step in on June 14, we expect him to challenge for the lightweight title in the fall, or at worst before the end of 2026. However, this highly optimistic timeline, targeting Nishawat, fall 2026 at the absolute earliest, is now in severe jeopardy. While Tsarukyan has not been officially released or fired by the UFC in a literal sense, his defiance has placed him squarely back into a state of promotional purgatory. Before Tsarukyan even confirmed his absence from the Washington weigh-ins, Dana White had admitted to reporters that he was still not thrilled with how the contender operated. With fresh fuel added to a year-long grudge, the consequences of his absence will likely manifest quietly and devastatingly. Months ago, a highly contrite Tsarukyan had promised a complete change in attitude regarding his past errors. I need to take chances now. I got injured, and this injury got misinterpreted. The doctor didn't let everybody know what really happened. So, some people still think I ducked that fight. Now, I just need to get back on track. So, I'm going to do whatever the UFC tells me to do. Yet, as June 14th approaches, that total compliance has vanished. Rather than standing ready in Washington, D.C. as the official safety net for a $60 million historic event, the best lightweight contender in the world will be in St. Louis, Missouri, wrestling Tony Ferguson, having proclaimed that he is fully booked until September. Tsarukyan remains completely confident in his elite status, asserting, "There are no names I should beat. UFC knows I'm the #1 contender. They know I'm a big problem for everyone. They know I can beat Gaethje, Paddy, and Topuria. That's why they give others a chance. I had my chance, and I lost my chance, unfortunately." In conclusion, thank you all so much for reading this comprehensive breakdown of the escalating standoff between Arman Tsarukyan and the UFC hierarchy. Your viewership and support mean the world, and we will continue to bring you the latest verified updates as this dramatic situation unfolds ahead of June 14th. To keep the conversation going, I want to leave you with a question for discussion. Do you believe Arman Tsarukyan is making the right strategic move by refusing to subject his body to an uncompensated, non-guaranteed weight cut? Or is he repeatedly sabotaging his own career by defying Dana White on the big